Hey everybody, welcome to the Nexus deep dive overhaul. Been working for the last few months with a whole bunch of people on an enormous number of changes to Nexus to get it tournament ready and massively improve its competitive playability and ladder. Right now we have the old version of Nexus pulled up, and people who have been playing 1v1 ladder will be familiar with its layout, the sectors, how the center, south, and north works, as well as the bases. And the new version of Nexus we also have pulled up, which we will also get into here. One of the major complaints on Nexus right now is the clutter, which just from looking at the center, the difference in the center, you can see there's a massive difference in terms of objects, and there's a massive difference in terms of potential pathing issues. We're going to stick with the center here, showing off the old gantries that were blocking shots, these walls that were interfering with stuff. Those have been basically removed in their entirety. Also, a seriously distinct feature here is this hedgerow, which is flanking the center victory point. This is going to break up this area in a way that should be more interesting and should be more playable than the current version, which is just open and potentially slightly more chaotic, although I think there's still merit to the way this is set up. This new system has been tested enough where I'm comfortable with the changes thus far. You can also tell there's been a lot of aesthetic changes. The atmosphere has been changed. The roads still work the same way that they did in the previous version on ladder, so there's no red cover, and there's still cutoffs that everybody is familiar with, the munitions points left and right of center. On the whole, the territory layout is... This is what we're looking at for territories. The capping order for the current ladder version had sort of these nested points that didn't really work for capping order. You can see here, 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 and here. The points that are connected to the bases, there's a lot of historical context that says that you should have some points that are easily accessible and connected to your base at all times. That's the case with the latter version, and that is the case with the new version. The main difference being is that the capping order is much more succinct in this case. There's still a cutoff for all the munis. The fuel and the victory point are still essentially in the same position that they were. You'll also notice a big difference in the TAC map, where the map has been made significantly smaller. You can actually see the difference here in the north and in the south. Another thing worth pointing out is that the cutoff here for the munitions used to be able to connect to the base. On the new version, the munitions point cutoff does not connect directly to the base. There's a null well, it's not a sector, but there's a null position between the base and the munitions point and its cutoff. This size difference is going to make this feel more like a 1v1 map, and this is also going to make the flow feel better, for lack of a better term. I don't really have a way to describe that, but it plays better when there isn't so much room on the outside. Back to the map here. We've kind of talked about the center and how it's been decluttered. These areas in here are remaining more or less the same. One of the advantages of these areas is late game we get certain vehicles that can run over infantry, and there have been situations where people have appreciated these areas because if your infantry need to go to an area where they're not vulnerable to being leveled by tanks, just being run over, these areas can accommodate that. Also interesting combat areas, and these hedgerows have kind of improved the way these have flowed because it allows people to move around these, and it's not such an open nightmare. Moving into the south, the current version, the south has a lot of walls and a lot of sort of built up areas. This one in particular, these buildings here and here were not used very much, and the width of the map all the way down here, as described earlier, didn't really make sense or feel right. If we go to the current version, or the new version I should say, these areas have been spruced up quite a bit. There's a lot more permeability down here, as well as up here. This has been opened up a section to make it feel more playable. Let's get a better angle there. So you can kind of see the difference. Some of the wall sections have been shortened up, right? There's been objects moved. There's been quite a lot of changes, so I'm not going to be able to enumerate all of them, but I want to give you a good idea comparison-wise. Okay, so this area as well has been modified significantly to give the player on the right more access. And I want to give a shout out to early on here to AE, who took a deep interest in this map in particular. While changes were being made, we did a lot of work going back and forth, just sort of talking through the map and the way that it's designed in certain ways, because the casters will know different things that players might not because they're watching the game instead of playing it. And AE had a lot of good insights that don't necessarily get picked up by players or balance testing, which I really appreciated. And one of those was, you know, the permeability of this area. Also, the right side got a significant number of changes, as you can see. Switching back and forth, it's more open, which players constantly beg for. Trying to strike a balance between a map that's wide open and a map that can be interacted with in an interesting way. You can see here, this is the current version of the map that everyone's used to playing. This is the new version. So the sectors have been moved to make easier capping. This sort of bit where you can cap easier in a more linear way has been set up so that is the case on all 4 points exiting the base. So here, right, top left, here, and bottom left. Moving into the north, this area has also been shrunk down, as shown earlier on the tactical map, right, to make it more playable. If we try to get some sort of an overview that's comparable, you can see the difference, especially up here. The way the buildings were set up did not really mesh well with the rest of the map. And this wall portion here, which was a little too close to this building, gave a little too easy access. And that building became a little too weak, has been pushed back. So you really need vetted grenades with longer range, or maybe something like rifle grenades from the Grenadiers to be able to access that building with a free grenade toss. These buildings up here have been modified quite a lot. The cover has been changed in this area. And the player on the right side and the left side should have an equal go at this area. The bases, some important changes have been made here where the base sectors were a little too close to the forest wall here. You can see how the bases have been backed up to give players room. So if they're getting artied, you have room to breathe. There's also another important change. The current version of this map doesn't have, or I should say the current version of this map does have an issue with Stukas. If you get a Stuka artillery piece, some people might be familiar with this, or just a regular emplacement artillery piece, too close to this, you're going to have these things firing and detonating rounds in the forest wall, which is not desirable. The current version, or I should say the new version, has a buffer built in to this forest wall on both sides, which will allow these types of artillery pieces, even if you scoot them right up against the edge, to fire already past this and be able to land rounds as needed, because not being able to fire rounds, this can change a game. If you're in like a tournament setting and you have a Stuka and you have a sweet shot to fire, maybe it's the first shot where people aren't expecting it, and this happens, that can change the entire tournament, and that wouldn't be acceptable to me. So in this case, that's been fixed. Very happy with that fix. That's been tested and seems to be working as designed. The base exits are essentially the same still. There's two big exits. So you have two big main exits, and then each one splits off into two exits. This allows players to not get pinned quite as easily. And there's been an enormous number of pathing changes. So if we go into our impasse, you can see objects like these. See like this little square here sticking out. Often mappers will miss this, where they need to just turn a piece just a little bit. And now you get a situation where that is tucked in. And that can make a giant difference for pathing, where you have objects all over the map that have these little pieces and bits that are sticking out on the level of impasse. Vehicles will get stuck on that. You know, light vehicles especially have a ton of problems. So this has been cleaned up significantly from the older version in terms of pathing, as well as just permeability of the map in general is better. I want to thank a lot of people for coming in and assisting with this. I made a kind of a bigger than usual push offering. I was offering cash. I know it was only $2 for replays here, but I was half expecting people to come in and just submit like 20 replays, then I'd be broke here. I did get feedback from people. And again, I want to thank everybody who helped. I know I'm going to miss people, but Sander93, Rosebone, LUVNEST, VONASTEN, BAOLANG, JOVE, VONIVAN, and AE, who took a special interest in this. People submitted replays. JOVE, I don't remember who played with you, and I can't pull these up because there was a hot fix in Co, so I apologize to your partner, but also who helped, Vaughn and Bao. There were just a lot of people, not a lot, but there was there was enough people who came in, submitted replays, and the data that comes in through replays is by far the most valuable. And good maps can't be made into great maps without community assistance. That's just part of the reality. And yeah, I did hear about Von Ivan. I'm streaming here, Honey Nuts. I did hear about Von Ivan's accident. I want to also wish him a speedy recovery. Wear your seatbelts, guys. Moving on, though, the rest of this map, I'm pretty darn happy with the current version of Nexus. This is what we should be seeing in ladder. I don't want to speak to a timeline on when these are going to be out, but it should not be measured in months that we're waiting for an update here. Stern Panther will have more information. I don't want to put words in his mouth. And I don't want to make any assumptions for Relic either, but this version should be a heck of a lot tighter than the previous. I'm sure you guys are going to discover other changes and fixes that have been implemented when you start playing. And I honestly would say this version of the map is very tournament ready. The permeability, being able to access cutoffs, new sector placement, and just all the changes that are made are going to make a giant difference, for everybody. And again, this is the new TAC map that we're going to be working with here. Yeah, thanks everybody again for supporting me and getting this map ready. And hopefully this is going to deliver some excellent games. So far, we've seen only just great. I mean, all the replays that were submitted were just interesting games to watch, good games to watch. And yeah, so this should be good to go. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.